Hey everyone, and welcome to another Konoha Reviews. Today we take a look at another Warhammer 40k game. I've said this before in other Warhammer game reviews, but Warhammer 40k has the reputation to produce quite mediocre to even bad games, with a few gems here and there. The fantasy version of Warhammer has been blessed with a bit more critically acclaimed titles and different genres, while Warhammer 40k has mostly been done in the strategy genre. A few of the widely renowned good Warhammer 40k games are Dawn of War 1 and 2. Though both strategy games, Dawn of War 1 tackled this universe in a much more conventional RTS way, where one had to build a base and collect resources to produce units and take out the enemy's base. Much like classics like Age of Empires, you needed to put down buildings to produce infantry, cavalry in the form of tanks, and catapults in the form of artillery vehicles. They did, however, also add hero units in this campaign, as seen in games like Warcraft 3, where one particular unit that was important to the plot was much more powerful than the others, and could even have special skills and attacks to deal devastating blows to the enemy. RTS games often of course come with a single player or campaign mode, and despite that there are games like Warcraft 3, Company of Heroes, World in Conflict, and more that have a very nice single-player campaign with an interesting story, most of the time the single-player campaign is rather lackluster. Luckily, that is not the case with Dawn of War 1. In the single-player campaign, you follow the story of the Blood Ravens, as they land on a planet that is under attack from Orks. The story is told with nice cutscenes that can feel sometimes a bit static, since this is a very old game and thus lacks animations and etc., which means that you are just watching two still models when they talk to each other. Despite the presentation being quite outdated, the story in itself is still interesting, but we have seen similar twists and turns in games like Warcraft 3. You essentially follow the role of a captain, as he and his old friend, a librarian, which is a space marine with a very strong psychic power, try to fight the orcs throughout the planet. As the story progresses, you find out that there are more factions on this planet as well, like the Eldar and of course Chaos. The 11 mission campaign is made in such a way that for the first 1/3 of the game, you will be fighting against the Orks, then the Eldar, and the final 3 or 4 levels, you will be fighting against Chaos. Though 11 missions might seem like a low number, most of them are quite lengthy, taking anywhere from 30 to 40 or more minutes, so you do have a pretty good and stocked single-player campaign. If some negativity could be said about the campaign, it is that it feels like an incomplete story or just of a fraction of something way bigger. It is of course difficult to tell a story in a game in such an expansive universe as Warhammer 40k. The same, for example, could be said for the Space Marine game that just focuses on the Ultramarines versus the Orcs and one particular agent of Chaos. The story in Dawn of War follows, as mentioned before, a somewhat similar path to that of Warcraft 3, with one of the main characters, in this case the librarian, being tempted by the evil forces of Chaos and turning on his allies. In Warcraft 3, this was of course a bit more shocking because that person was one of the main characters you controlled yourself, and thus feels more impactful there. But it still has weight in this story as you are forced to face your friend in one of the latest levels. It should also be noted that you do take control of the librarian, but he is simply not the main character in this story. The single-player campaign also has a good pace, with almost every level introducing a new kind of gameplay mechanic or unit to be added to your army. Most of the earlier levels are also quite linear, where the objective is just to simply get from point A to B. Making a giant army in the beginning and then just rushing through the level works quite well here, but later on, you get more interesting levels, where it opens up, and ideally, you will make multiple armies to conquer and defend several areas on the map, as the enemy can come from different directions. You will even sometimes get control of Imperial Guard units, including their infantry and Leman Russ tanks. Sometimes during battles, you will also have allied NPCs that will help you or hold the line while you complete your objective, and this adds to the intensity and epic feel of a certain battle or mission. Though hero units were nothing new, one particular thing that was quite unique in this game was how you could specialize and expand each group of units. Rather than selecting one individual infantry soldier like you did back in the day of Age of Empires, you would select a squad of Space Marines that would count as one unit, and you could reinforce these up to 8 units plus a sergeant to make it a squad of 9. Not only could you make these units better with general upgrades like more accuracy or better armor, much like you could in games like Age of Empires, but here you could also choose to give a handful of them specific weapons like a heavy bolter, a plasma gun, a flamethrower, or a rocket launcher. Each of the weapons had strengths and weaknesses, and by this you could really have specialized squads that were also indicated by the border color of their unit portrait. For example, if you were going to fight a lot of vehicles or take out enemy buildings, it's best to have some squads that have a lot of rocket launchers with them. But if it's a lot of infantry you'll be facing, squads with flamethrowers are better, as the rocket launchers tend to miss smaller targets. Some might find it disappointing that you can only fight as the Space Marines, as many RTS games by that time too already offered multiple campaigns from different perspectives. Though the races of the Eldar, Orks, and Chaos were available in multiplayer, a story campaign was not to be seen. Something that they changed in some of the expansions where you did have campaigns from multiple angles. Overall, it is a very solid game that thrives off the world and setting it uses as a base. Were this any other newly created setting, then I'm sure it would still feel solid, though a bit familiar, with a few cool tweaks here and there like the squad customization. On a final note, and to end on something positive, it should be said that one of the highlights for this game back in the day were the awesome animations that were used. Using motion capture in RTS games had been a thing since Rome Total War, and thus, that in and of itself was not that impressive. But each unit really did have very unique animations that were really cool to look at, including the Dreadnought Walkers that would pick up units and crush and spin it around as blood splurted out, only just to throw its leftovers away like a piece of trash. Really cool and emphasizing on the hardness of the Warhammer 40k universe. The game is a definite must-play for Warhammer 40k fans, even now. But for wintered RTS players that are used to the more modern grand scale games, this might just feel too old school. On the other hand, there are also lovers of RTS games that crave that old school feeling, and for those, this is a perfect game to pick up for an incredible cheap price. Plus, the expansions are arguably even better than the base game. In the end, Warhammer 40k Dawn of War gets an 8.4, and by the time you will be watching this, I will also have played and finished the first expansion of Dawn of War, Winter Assault. I wasn't sure if I should do expansion reviews on this channel, but these Dawn of War expansions are supposedly so good and offer better and more varied experiences compared to the original base game that it is definitely worth taking a look. I will definitely come back to you guys later with another Warhammer 40k review in the coming weeks.